I'm not really into memorizing the stupidities of American sophistry, Mamdani. I understand that the Israelis convinced British intelligence that their duty was to go along with political correctness in the AIDS attack and to pad their resume against being collaborators with Robert Fripp's farce. I understand that. I know how you got it to work. The purpose of John Lennon's Houdini was to make crystal clear that the investigation would never be taken out of the hands of the perpetrators. That's perfectly obvious. It's an almighty slander. And they put in that it was an existential dilemma that Pitt just had to go for. An endless interrogation of the counterculture against the idea that a deaf kid couldn't just be too scared to say no to Israeli reefer. And they had car thieves, and they tell this drama story, and they put it into place as a gang. Well, the gang was the VA. These were veterans from the Vietnam War. Hard-boiled pedophiles trafficking children who kidnapped and tortured me. And all of the so-called juvenile delinquencies that rained down on me were their doing. You could say, oh, Queerwall should have held out at Weathertop. I mean, it's creepy idiocity. And they have Kamala Harris groupies and brainies from military sociology, from Black Literati, playing fast and loose with Cornel West's mingling dynamics. The doctrine that you should not pull away from people terrorizing you. That you're not allowed to think that you're different from somebody who's afflicted, for example. So they start making new bacteriologicals to test your learning because you're supposed to be Aaron Bushnell, willing to sacrifice yourself to the fire. And this came from Nosferatu, whose mind was clearly seen in Hamas mentality, who wanted a mass martyrdom to bring about so Roger Waters could wave the Palestinian flag in British glory. It's not a history that Seattle can erase. So they figure they can, at the minimum, make good on it to punish me for snitching. And that's where we're at in all of this. And they can erase the whole thing by calling me, getting everybody to say he's mentally ill. That's why the gaslighting troop came and exotically, variously advocated for the people who murdered my father. It's all advocacy for the people, for the perpetrators. You know, if the ICJ gets their hands on Putin, he's going to need a pretty good lawyer over the Ukraine as it is. Rosa Clemente and Gail Burstyn are as one in this operation. It's international terrorism, the Donald Ostro chant that international terrorism will replace human rights, take the place of human rights, which he gave at Three Rivers Stadium, made wholesome by the fact that Eno likes his music and He wants to do away with Queerball, who wasn't Midori enough to stop John Lennon from pulling his Houdini. There wasn't a Houdini. I keep forgetting. Queerball could have saved John Lennon. That's what it's all about. That's why we had the Ripper murder Shannon over the sacred Lenny Penny and the duty to give it to Medicaid. He's laughing at the Shulman divvies with Andrea Swimmer. I mean, this is what they did. This is where the showboat arrives. This is failure to warn, failure to do the decent thing. And of course, they don't like the idea that I pulled myself together and overcame a neuroplasm. Want to hear the story of how I overcame a neuroplasm? It's quite an interesting one. I trusted King Crimson. Oh God, that helped me, because that leads to the idea that only John Lennon could have handled the spirits of the gays. And that's why they canoodled with the Midori Goto down in Texas in the name of George Bush. I trusted Robert Fripp. Robert Fripp is my best friend, they had me chanting. I hitchhiked from Pittsburgh to St. Louis just to hear him play. And he carried on about the Sufis. I mean, these are the British spy war guys who had in their magical kit things to sprinkle once they got started in the TikTok war over the, TikTok war media. The Red Heifer Show, Brian Eno and King Crimson. We're talking about Sufis. Oh, help me. So I attended a class with Syed Hussein Nasser, upon whom be peace. He's a very dignified, decent man. Cannot fail but to be impressed by him. He's in his 90s at Harvard Divinity School. I know, the creepy thing that goes on in Saudi Arabia towards pornography and so on and so forth. It doesn't happen in America. So, I mean, you're talking about enculturation to people who believe in privacy and can watch girls in their erotic arts without being overcome with guilt, and being exploited by Pope Carl, subjecting them to successive degradations of the X motive, arrives at dutiful Muslim badgering against pornography. Well, do your duty and badger against pornography. That's perfectly okay with me. It's sensible reading. I understand pornography has a lot to answer for. But what happened was that I meditated on the source of intelligence and the question of whether love radiated from intelligence or vice versa came up a couple of times in a couple of different places. And this allowed me to realize that there was an obstruction to my psychological consistency, radiance. And so I began tugging at the papers from the drawers that slide smooth. To quote Pino Gabriel's amazing ESP for espionage. I began to think about listening to the quiet voices, Brian Eno Hooker. And I got hold of it. Using good old-fashioned Sufi meditation, I got hold of it. Now, my ego is against seeing me in any way as connected to God other than as a subject of the creation. I can't rationalize the ego logical leap that comes with the idea of being connected. But there's Fripp. Jump down, hold PP. God has revealed his music. Even Miles Kirshner was derisive about this. Partners though they are. A prophet of Allah who remained silent at the horrors in Gaza. But ironically and coincidentally, as the crow never cries, where the crow never flies, I'm trying to avoid having my poetry poached. That's how I came to overcome the neuroplasm. But I was just terribly confused. Rather obviously, I had an impacted neuroplasm that froze my brain cells shut, in which they jam-packed Vietnam War guerrilla theater operation that I didn't even know it happened. They're going, did you rape? Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you rape somebody? You raped somebody. Peter Gabriel's using rapid eye movement on it, and I'm vomiting in the streets. I remember a freezing cold day when they found me, when I was too afraid to go to school. And Sergeant Mayor was, oh, you were jealous. You wonder what forgave Mayor Peduto for admitting I had been subject to horrible acts. Well, get over it.